Our players on the screen right now. Gianluca Grassi is on screen at the moment, and he'll be going up against Ryosuke Kondo for those of you who have just joined us. The teams land, and it's time to start diving in. The restricted pairings very nicely placed at the top by these players, well organized in the battle box. Gianluca's team, of course, the Xerneas Groudon, we talked about it a little bit earlier on. One of your favorites in the Komodo, Salamence, Incineroar, and Amoonguss round out that little team. We move over to Ryosuke's team. We did talk about that Duskmane Necrozma coming out from some of these Japanese representatives. That's going to be pairing up with the Rayquaza to make up the restricted pairing there. And obviously the team complemented by Incineroar, Tapu Fini, Tapu Koko, and the Kangaskhan selection. The Mega Pokemon that was overlooked for so long but has been making a very recent comeback.
Mega Kangaskhan, it's really interesting because going into the Ultra format, I think a lot of people thought, oh, you know, Parental Bond isn't as good as it used to be back in 2016, back in 2015. You know, maybe I won't start using it, but, you know, ever since we saw it have such an amazing run at NAIC, I think that it's just been picking up more and more steam, and it's great. I mean, it gets access to, like, a Scrappy as an ability, so you can use normal type attacks on Ghost-type Pokemon. Won't come into play here, unfortunately, but it's very versatile. It gets access to, you know, Double Edge, which is just such a powerful move if that Pokemon's not intimidated. So, you know, I think that's really going to dictate how Gianluca is going to approach this game. You know, he has to worry about, you know, the Kangaskhan, the Incineroar. I think he also has to worry about the combination of that Rayquaza and that Duskmane Necrozma, but you know, he does have the tools on his side of the field. You know, he has access to a couple Intimidates of his own to stop that Rayquaza from being as scary. You know, obviously the Xerneas is going to be a very powerful Pokemon if it's given the opportunity to Geomancy. So I think the game plan for, you know, this game one probably is going to be, you know, play fairly standard, maybe not reveal as many tricks as these trainers have brought to this tournament. But, you know, try and get those consistent Pokemon, those consistent strategies set up. You know, fake out Geomancy, great way to start. But it looks like Kondo just has that, you know, that counter right on the field already.
Yeah, well, we are going to see the opening from both these players. Both of them going with Incineroar and a restricted Pokemon. Incineroar and Xerneas for Gianluca, and then Incineroar and Duskmane Necrozma from Ryosuke Kondo. Really, really interesting to see that come into play immediately. We talked about it. Japanese representatives and Duskmane Necrozma really go hand in hand, and this is the perfect time to see it in front of a Xerneas.
Yeah, really forcing Gianluca, I think, to switch right in turn one. You know, you don't want to risk a very powerful Steel-type move connecting with that Xerneas, even though it has been intimidated. You know, getting a second Intimidate down on that Duskmane Necrozma and definitely threatening it a bit more with the Salamence and Incineroar combo is sort of a better start for him. But, you know, Ryosuke does have the opportunity here to go for a Fake Out, to go for a very powerful move. If Gianluca lets him, that's a Z move already from that Incineroar.
Yeah,
First thing.
Yeah, the Incineroar not messing around in this one. Usually Incineroars take their time and exchange fake outs for the opening turn of the game, but a malicious Moonsault is opening this one up. No time to fake it out when you could just try and just deal with it immediately. Incineroar's signature Z move landing there on the Duskmane Necrozma, not going to be quite enough, even though it's super effective. But that Duskmane Necrozma a lot easier to handle right now. Ryosuke will round out this turn, of course, with round out the Incineroar on his side, not fake outing either, just going with a U-turn to kick this one off. That Salamence coming in, not Mega Evolved yet, so we'll see exactly if it can take any kind of beatings, any big hits that it needs to take. The Rayquaza comes in place of Incineroar. Necrozma moving last in the turn. We knew what was coming when it was taking its time. Does set up the Trick Room. Certainly an interesting time to have Trick Room on the field when you've just bought your Rayquaza in.
Yeah, and I mean, fortunately for Rayquaza, it does have access to Extreme Speed, which is probably one of the fastest moves in the game due to the fact that it's bumped up in a couple priority tiers. So it doesn't necessarily have to move last, but it certainly is a strange setup, I think. You know, probably an indication of maybe Ryosuke has these Pokemon trained a bit slower, so they're a bit bulkier. But also good information for him as well. That Intimidate from his own Incineroar onto Gianluca's Incineroar allowed it to survive that malicious Moonsault, you know, pretty comfortably. And it will have an opportunity here to retaliate, you know, once it comes back out onto the field and sheds those Intimidates that have stacked up.
I think getting rid of those Intimidates is so important. And the Tapu Fini coming in to take its place. Misty Surge on the field. I don't think that's going to be the biggest concern right now, of course, with some of these choices. Mega Rayquaza, becoming Mega Rayquaza rather, so nothing too surprising there. It does do a whole lot of damage in a number of different forms. Its Delta Stream comes into play, so the Groudon coming in from Gianluca could change that up a little bit. Salamence is scared, does decide to keep itself safe with a Protect. Incineroar's U-turn will land on that Rayquaza, so saving an Intimidate and potential return of the Fake Out a little bit later on. And we'll see exactly what this Rayquaza decides to try and do. It's got a number of options. If its targeting goes down right, it could be in a really good position. The Amoonguss taking the field for Gianluca, and we'll see exactly what it has to deal with. It's going to be a Dragon Ascent towards Salamence, so no big hits there. This Amoonguss must be feeling pretty good about itself.
Yeah, Amoonguss is the perfect adjustment, especially for a Trick Room-centric team. You know, Mega Rayquaza, it's levitating. It's not making contact with that misty terrain, and as a result, it can be put to sleep with something like a Spore. So Gianluca, I think Amoonguss is one of those Pokemon that you put on your team to help out your Xerneas, but also help out your Trick Room matchup, and just able to get that Pokemon in for free onto the field, not taking any damage. Will most likely move first because of the Trick Room. So Ryosuke really needs to figure out how he's going to handle the targeting here. Yeah, I stand corrected. That Tapu Fini actually moved first.
Yeah, the Tapu Fini going right before that Amoonguss, definitely trained in a very specific fashion. And a Nature's Madness making that Salamence a lot more easy to deal with. Of course, Amoonguss does take advantage of its naturally very low speed, landing a Spore onto this Rayquaza, not able to do anything this turn. As Salamence starts out with the double edges, will land into that Tapu Fini, doing a little over half damage, but the recoil there on Salamence, bringing it dangerously low.
Interesting to note here as well, that Tapu Fini has one more attack, I think, guaranteed, because it was slower than that Amoonguss. It could go for something like a Nature's Madness onto the Amoonguss and get it back down to half health, but if Gianluca has the Regenerator ability on it and switches that Amoonguss out, it's going to be able to regenerate a lot of that health fairly easily. And fortunately for Amoonguss, with an Incineroar in the back of the party supporting it, it can move in and out of battle pretty easily. So I think it's great that Gianluca is keeping it on the field for now. I think that this Amoonguss still has a lot it can offer, especially while Trick Room is up on the field, but definitely something he'll probably want to save for later once Trick Room runs out.
Well, the Amoonguss just keeps causing problems here. That's going to be a Rage Powder drawing moves away, and in this case, it pulls a Heal Pulse from that Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini not able to take the follow-up double edge from this Salamence. Of course, Salamence will keep taking recoil damage, and Gianluca's just putting himself in a fantastic position. Yes, he's fallen down a little bit in his Salamence's health, but he's taken the first knockout. This Duskmane Necrozma is particularly low on health as well, and he's got his Amoonguss up in Trick Room.
That is just a really great spot and a really well-played Rage Powder. Tapu Fini, definitely one of the most supportive Pokemon, I think, in the Ultra format right now. And, Ryosuke following a strategy, I think that was, did really well at the Japan Championships, having that Tapu Fini with Heal Pulse to be able to heal your Pokemon. It's going to be slower because of the Trick Room. It's going to move first as a result, and you can sort of keep your Pokemon around on the field, provided you can connect things. Going forward into Game 2, I would be very surprised if Ryosuke lets that Amoonguss sit on the field for so long as a result of just how detrimental that turn was.
Well, the biggest concern, I think, for Ryosuke was letting that Amoonguss come in so freely. If that Dragon Ascent had targeted that slot, we'd be in for a very different game.
Oh, definitely.
He does have a slightly better position right now. Incineroar next to the Necrozma. Obviously, the Necrozma's not healed up like he was trying to get it healed with to really cover that. So we'll see exactly what he can do. The Salamence, though, leaving the field after taking a whole lot of damage. Incineroar coming back in. Decides it intimidates its time. Needs to get that back out on these two Pokemon that deal good amounts of physical damage. The Duskmane Necrozma certainly doesn't appreciate them in the slightest. Amoonguss keeps itself safe. A nice steady Protect right there. So not going to be dealing any more or taking any more damage this turn, especially not from that Necrozma's Earth Power. The Incineroar on Ryosuke's side, again, trying to U-turn, not able to complete the move. Amoonguss just left stranded. The Trick Room does end. Obviously, Necrozma back on the field to potentially set that up once more, but I really don't think Ryosuke wants to in this setup.
No, I think you got to start going for damage, and that's really the unfortunate thing about Trick Room is that it's a really great move, but you need to capitalize on those turns. You need to deal damage, and Gianluca was able to just keep switching around and sort of prioritizing what Pokemon he kept safe so that he could stall it out fairly safely. If Ryosuke does decide he wants to go for Trick Room, he has to worry about the fake out from Gianluca's Incineroar, and he also has to worry about the fact that it will be moving last again. It will be taking damage from these these two Pokemon. Fortunately, cannot be put to sleep because it is Misty Terrain is still active, but you know, a Flare Blitz or even a Darkest Lariat from that Incineroar should be able to get that KO.
Well, it does know that it's in a little bit of danger and just protects itself, the Duskmane Necrozma. The Amoonguss keeping the Rage Powders going, wants to draw as much attention its way. The Darkest Lariat will hit the Protect, so no damage done this turn. And that's it. That's all we're going to get is a pretty much slow and steady turn. Rayquaza's still asleep at this juncture, but the Misty Terrain has ended, so it's going to be real easy, of course, if Necrozma tries to Trick Room to just shut it down with a Spore.
Yeah, and I think Ryosuke's win condition at this point in time, honestly, is to hope that that Rayquaza wakes up as soon as possible and is able to start dealing big damage. Unfortunately for him, though, you know, Gianluca, not only does he have all 4 of his Pokemon, that Xerneas is still sitting in the back of his party, you know, very safe, still has access to the Mental Herb and Geomancy combination, or Power Herb and the Geomancy combination, if that's what it decides to do. So it's just really going to be an uphill battle for him moving forwards. I think he should try and see how much information he can possibly learn about these teams. You know, maybe how much damage this Rayquaza can do to that Amoonguss, hypothetically.
Well, it's not going to be able to do that anymore. It is, of course, just going to remain asleep in this instance. The Duskmane Necrozma put to sleep by the Spore. Not going to be able to do anything for a little while here. Incineroar itself just trying to U-turn, get a little bit more damage down. It's all going to add up. And, of course, save and intimidate for later. We'll see exactly what Gianluca decides to bring in at this juncture. I mean, the Xerneas could be interesting. Certainly going to put some pressure down here on this Salamence, and on the Rayquaza. And, of course, the Duskmane Necrozma. Easy to pick up with how low its health is right now.
And its buddy Amoonguss is still on the field, can still Rage Powder, and I don't even think the Xerneas needs Geomancy at this point in time. You know, Dazzling Gleam with Necrozma at that low health should just knock it out, and then if Rayquaza isn't knocked out by that first Dazzling Gleam, you know, it's very easy to set up another one when both of your opponent's Pokemon are asleep and, you know, have a chance of not waking up next turn.
Well, the Xerneas really could just push on and I think tidy up this whole game.
Yeah.
Of course, if you do decide to Geomancy in Gianluca's shoes, then you're in a really great position to guarantee knockouts. But as you said, it should just be able to push on with consistent and steady damage from something like Dazzling Gleam. Incineroar comes in, Amoonguss has sat on the field, not taken any damage, but done a whole lot of work in its place. Of course, does decide to land and intimidate down as well. The Dazzling Gleam starts out the turn, and Necrozma holding on with an absolute sliver of health. Rayquaza taking a good amount, so not easily knocked out, but those Spores have been so strong, while both Rayquaza and Duskmane Necrozma just remain asleep for this turn.
That's excellent information, though. I mean, Ryosuke, running Trick Room, running very bulky Pokemon, I think it's going to be safe for Gianluca to assume that most of these hits, you know, provided there's no Geomancy or other stats involved on the field, are going to be 2 or 3 hit knockouts, which will just be good planning for him moving forwards into Game 2. Again, I think his strategy was just really well executed in this Game 1, but Ryosuke is going to have the opportunity to sort of, you know, reevaluate his strategy, maybe figure out how he can better handle the threat of the Amoonguss, knowing that he wants to go for Trick Room again. And, you know, knowing that your Pokemon are going to be a little bit more bulkier and that you are going to have to take those slow plays going into a Game 2 situation, I think sets you up for success a bit more.
Well, we do see that a very, I don't want to say quick, but timely forfeit, I think, there from Ryosuke. Wants to make sure that he's got time to complete the games. He's going to need to win 2 back-to-back to get there this time. And I think he's learned enough, right? He's pretty much found out that I know exactly what his team does. There's no surprises. He doesn't want to give up any more information than he has to. And so we'll be moving on to Game 2 with Gianluca Grassi 1-up on Ryosuke Kondo.
Yeah, and it's cool to see, you know, the Groudon-Xerneas combination continuing just to be so imposing. One thing I thought that was super interesting about Gianluca's Game 1 was the fact that, you know, he only brought the Xerneas. That Groudon was nowhere to be seen at all, and just that combination of Incineroar, the Mega Salamence, and the Amoonguss is just, you know, 3 very solid Pokemon, which they worked very well together. They have really nice synergy. Those Intimidates are so detrimental to a team that really focus itself around physical attackers. And they just really work well just to keep switching each other out, in and out as well. It just all works together, you know, very well. And I think that's the kind of team that you want to have at the World Championships, to be able to maneuver like that, to be able to get yourself out of maybe tight situations like an unexpected Trick Room. It is super important.
I think this is one of those teams, Gianluca's team, that is very much a traditional standard, a known quantity, right? The Xerneas Groudon, we know how that works. Salamence and Incineroar complement them so well, Amoonguss as well. The Komodo, a little bit of a wild card in most kind of people's eyes, but it's been doing well at international championships. It's definitely a known quantity now, and you do have to respect it. I think with the Tapu Fini on the field, you have to be a little more careful about it there. And I think the Tapu Fini, something that maybe Ryosuke is going to leave, something that didn't seem to do that much. Of course, the Heal Pulse play went horribly wrong, and it's just not what you want to see in a game like this, where you really want to keep winning early on at the World Championships. Yeah,
fortunately, he does have other option on his team to stop stuff like Spore. He does have that Tapu Koko. Electric Terrain will only stop Sleep as a status, but it will stop it. So he has a little bit of flexibility in that regard. He could also just try and target down that Amoonguss. It's going to be making an appearance after it did so well in Game 1. Maybe once you see it on the field, you just go all in. You don't set up Trick Room right away. We saw that the Amoonguss was actually kind of fast, so something to keep in mind. But I'm sure that Ryosuke knows, or at least has somewhat of an idea of how his Pokemon are going to interact speed-wise compared to this Amoonguss, and can figure out, okay, maybe I try to just go straight for the Dragon Ascent with the Rayquaza. I wish we would have seen the item on that Amoonguss. I think some of them are running those, big berries that will restore health. Some of them are running stuff like Koba Berry to take less damage from attacks like that. I think that's like the one piece of information that Ryosuke is missing, but it's certainly something you can play around in the moment.
Well, whenever Amoonguss is legal, it's such a good Pokemon. I remember back in the day in 2011, where people were adjusting the speeds on their Amoonguss to get advantages in and out of Trick Room. It's always been such a strange one, and knowing where that Amoonguss lands exactly is so important for both players. The leads take the field once again, though. We're moving into Game 2 very quickly, and it's exactly the same. Positioning's changed a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's the same lead Pokemon. Of course, there was some switching that caused some problems for Ryosuke. So if he can either make the switch or make the call a little bit better, can put himself in a fantastic position. He knows he can take the Malicious Moonsault in this instance from this Incineroar. Maybe just changes it up. Maybe doesn't set up the Trick Room and just tries to deal with his Xerneas as quickly as possible, or even the Salamence on the way in.
You have to wonder, last game he started this game out with a U-turn Trick Room. I like the adjustment immediately to Tapu Fini. It does have access to Nature's Madness. And if that is able to connect with the Xerneas, that should put it at half of its health, regardless of those Geomancy boosts. And having it within that range coming forwards, is going to be really important, I think, especially since we do see that Geomancy going up.
It's going to be the classic opening turn for the Incineroar and Xerneas player. Fake out one thing you're a little bit worried about, and then Geomancy, of course, with your Xerneas. It'll be interesting to see exactly what Ryosuke does with his Incineroar, because that's been waiting a little bit to have a turn. Some of them do carry interesting moves to try and deal with this, but he could be in a very sticky situation if he's not able to do that. The U-turn, starting out, just going down towards the Incineroar over on Gianluca's side. And at the end of the day, you're still facing down a Geomancy boosted Xerneas. Your answer to that needs to appear on the field pretty much immediately.
It almost has to be the Dawnwing's Necrozma, just because if that last Pokemon is the Rayquaza in the back of Ryosuke's party, that's the last Pokemon you want to be staring down, something like a Xerneas. And fortunately for this Necrozma, the combination of the switch and the U-turn allowed it to get back out on the field unintimidated. So it is Steel type. It is going to resist, the Fairy type attacks that Xerneas is most likely bringing. I would be very surprised if it couldn't take a Moonblast from full health, to be quite honest. So it will have one opportunity to do something, and whether or not that's going to be Trick Room or an attack is something that's going to set sort of Ryosuke's sort of pacing for the rest of this match moving forwards.
Yeah, we'll see exactly how he goes for it. The Malicious Moonsault threat has been removed by the Incineroar, switching out for the Salamence. The attack's going down. Tapu Fini not too concerned. The Necrozma a little bit more peeved about it, as an Intimidate comes in return from Ryosuke. Incineroar on his side of the field will intimidate a Xerneas and a Salamence. Not usually the two that you want to be throwing them at, but they'll help out against the Salamence potentially. Xerneas does just start out dazzling, gleaming, so making sure it can do a whole lot of damage. Incineroar taking a good amount here, and the Duskmane Necrozma takes a good amount, but it's not enough to knock it out.
All right.
And that means we're getting the Z move in retaliation. Doesn't really want to mess around, and I think with the Steel Dance coming right through, I think things and time might be up for this Xerneas already. And there it is, searing Sunrays smash. No matter how well you boost up Xerneas, this is not the way for you to go.
It's, you know, the steel type corresponding move for Menacing Moonrays Maelstrom, which are, you know, two of the most common tongue twisters in the Pokemon format right now. That Intimidate certainly was a nice idea, but you're absolutely right. That thing just completely destroys that Xerneas and really frees up this Necrozma to start dealing, you know, bigger damage, maybe get Trick Room down. We'll still have to worry about the presence of that Amoonguss, but given the Pokemon on the field right now, you know, there's only so much that Amoonguss can do. It can really only redirect attacks. So just a great mix-up from Ryosuke. Just, you know, was able to get that positioning on the board a lot better and was able to knock out the Xerneas, which is really the key Pokemon in Gianluca's strategy going back to Game 1.
This team's so focused on defending the Xerneas. The way and the selection he bought for game number 1 were all about Xerneas. And even though he won without requiring it as such, you know, just using that Spore, that was still the core of the strategy. Now the Xerneas is gone. He's left with Salamence and Incineroar. It could be a Groudon in the back. I'd be certainly interested to see if that was the adaptation he made to take advantage of this different Necrozma play. But right now, we're certainly in an interesting situation. Necrozma does have a really good variety of moves. Not going to be using any of them this turn as it switches out for this Tapu Fini once again. Tapu Fini facing off really nicely against Salamence and Incineroar. Salamence decides it's time to Mega Evolve. Needs to make sure that it's got as many stats available to it as possible. But I don't really think it makes too much of a difference in this matchup.
No, I think the Salamence will do some nice like chip damage with this double edge onto Incineroar, maybe put it into knockout range for next turn, but overall going to be taking a bit of damage for its trouble, and we will get the opportunity to see Gianluca's last Pokemon, as that U-turn was enough to pick up the KO on that Incineroar, so it looks like Ryosuke as well is going to be down to his last, you know, his last few Pokemon.
Yeah, both
just tying it up.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see exactly how this one goes. It is the Amoonguss. So overall, I mean, the damage output relies solely on the Salamence right now.
That's really tough.
That's really the only option. And if you keep double edging, you're just going to keep losing your own health. But at 3-3, you know, we're not going to see the last Pokemon right now from Ryosuke. That Incineroar did get knocked out in the previous turn, so Necrozma hasn't been intimidated. Might be a deciding factor in why that switch went down. But we'll see exactly how he decides to execute it now. The Amoonguss caused him so many troubles the last time, and he may just turn on it immediately to just get it off the field.
Yeah, and speaking of getting Pokemon off the field, like, I think Gianluca really has a tough decision to make here, because that Salamence has been intimidated a couple of times. You know, it does have double edge. It must be running some sort of physically oriented moveset. You really don't want to get locked into those intimidates when you're down to your last couple of Pokemon. So great opportunity for him to potentially make that switch, save it for later, but for now it looks like he's hoping that the protection of this Amoonguss and that redirection of the Rage Powder is enough to sort of buy him a bit of a window to try and claw his way back.
Well, he's going to be taking some damage himself through the use of this double edge. Does land on the Tapu Fini, doing a good amount of damage. Amoonguss caught by the Nature's Madness right there. And the Necrozma does decide that it's time to Trick Room. With the Xerneas gone, it's already done a good amount, but it does want to make sure that this Amoonguss, you know, it's kind of teasing it a little bit, right? It's saying, I've got Trick Room set up for you, but you're not allowed to Spore in the Misty Terrain right now. Just as I say that, the graphic does pop up, and Misty Terrain is almost at an end.
So that means Ryosuke does have the opportunity to set it up again, which it looks like he is thinking of switching in the Rayquaza here. But more importantly, you know, this Amoonguss is already down to 50% of its health, and assuming it doesn't switch out this turn or otherwise protect itself, this Necrozma could have had the opportunity to just target it down. Instead, interesting, looks like he was predicting a Incineroar switch in.
Yeah, the Earth Power not doing anything this time. Those double edges just keep coming as well from this Salamence. It's almost got itself down to literally half of its health, only a few hit points standing between it and that threshold. The Rayquaza does take a lot of damage from the double edge on the way in, certainly a little more than you'd usually like to see. But at the same time, you know, there is essentially a switch being forced right now. I was expecting one from Ryosuke to start this turn, but Amoonguss leaving immediately, knowing that the Misty Terrain switch is probably coming, and it's going to get another Intimidate down. Intimidate, very, very important against this Rayquaza. Wants to make sure Dragon Ascent is a little bit more manageable, and there it is, Mega Evolving right away. No switches this time from Ryosuke.
Ryosuke might have been hoping to catch Gianluca by surprise here. You know, I think you would think that with the Misty Terrain and the Spore being, you know, such key components of Game 1 that Ryosuke would try and prioritize keeping it up on the field, but looks like he's just hoping that this Extreme Speed will, you know, begin to chip down damage on some of these Pokemon, maybe even looking to try and knock out that Amoonguss before it was able to connect the Spore with that Rayquaza this time around.
Well, we are going to see that do a little bit of damage, but the more important damage this turn is the Sunsteel Strike. Does head towards Incineroar, doesn't do all that much damage. Probably expecting some more conservative play over there. And another big double edge from Salamence keeps this Rayquaza really, really low down in the pecking order of health available. Incineroar and Salamence both sit just below half health. Incineroar closer to that halfway mark than the Salamence. This Rayquaza looking a lot healthier than we've seen it in any of the previous games.
It's really interesting. Part of me was wondering if maybe the combination of that Extreme Speed and that Sunsteel Strike from that Necrozma would have been enough to KO that Amoonguss. You know, if he was able to remove that from the field entirely and it was just down to the Incineroar and the Salamence, I think that would be a really great spot for Ryosuke to be in. But instead, this Rayquaza almost forced to go for the Extreme Speed this turn just so it can deal some damage before it gets KO'd by one of these Pokemon. Maybe Necrozma can pick up the knockout on that Salamence now that its health is so low with an attack. But overall, you know, Gianluca is just slowly, you know, finding a way to keep powering through this Trick Room, powering through these very bulky Pokemon on the opposing side of the field.
And we'll see exactly if the Tapu Fini can add to that push for damage. It does set up the Misty Terrain, so making sure the Amoonguss is going to struggle if it comes back in. Rayquaza just playing it safe right now. A Protect on this turn means Fake Out lands on Tapu Fini. It's not important because it just switched in. As Salamence continues this onslaught of double edges. It's just going to keep going, but this time it lands into the Protecting Rayquaza, and it's not going to be enough there. It doesn't go through the Protect like a Z move, and Rayquaza lives to fight on another day, maybe get down another Extreme Speed before this Trick Room expires, or, you know, just try and keep itself in a good position. Incineroar completely done at this juncture. Amoonguss switching into the Misty Terrain, not where it usually wants to be, but certainly interesting. Tapu Fini's Heal Pulse, though, will head right over towards that Rayquaza. Wants to keep it safe from these double edges and see if it can do that as well. Rayquaza does find room for the Dragon Ascent here.
Ooh, good targeting.
And now that Amoonguss coming in, not what it wants to see.
And that's just a knockout. So, you know, not only did Ryosuke find a way to get his Tapu Fini on the field without Amoonguss staring it down so the Heal Pulse could connect with that Rayquaza, he did it while knocking out the Pokemon that caused him so much trouble in Game 1. And even though this almost cost him his Tapu Fini, you know, just great preparation. That Tapu Fini going to munch down on one of those pinch berries and get practically all of its health back. And this is almost the perfect timing for Trick Room to run out because that Rayquaza should be able to Extreme Speed to KO that Salamence if it wasn't for this other Intimidate. But otherwise, Ryosuke has this opportunity to sort of rotate Pokemon around and really, I think, position himself well for the end game. Poor Salamence on Gianluca's side of the field, you know, with such little health and knowing that the double edge is really its only form of dealing damage, there's only so much more that can get you before you, unfortunately, knock your own Pokemon out.
And that's where I think it's interesting that Tapu Fini is carrying Heal Pulse, right? Because you're going to keep double edging and keep losing health. But periodically, of course, the Tapu Fini is going to be able to land a Heal Pulse and get that recovery up. We've gone from Trick Room, now we're in Tailwind, immediately set up by Gianluca there, so making sure he's going to be going first every single turn for the rest of the game. Rayquaza, though, will just Dragon Ascent. This one landing on that Incineroar. It obviously has been intimidated a couple times, and Incineroar is able to cling on. The Invisible Focus Sash coming through as it clings on with 1 hit point. Tapu Fini flinching from that earlier Fake Out, but that Incineroar is going to be real easy to tidy up with an Extreme Speed, and with that in mind, Salamence Incineroar not able to provide all of the answers that Gianluca needs, and it looks like we're going to be heading on into Game 3. Just need confirmation on that, of course, from both players selecting their move. Ryosuke probably still making those decisions, still trying to play this game to his maximum potential, especially after what happened in Game 1.
An interesting reveal of the Tailwind that last turn from Gianluca. you have to sort of wonder, okay, what was his thought process going through there? Because it certainly was, you know, a risk. I think he was looking to try and ensure that his Salamence would be the fastest Pokemon on the field and would force that Mega Rayquaza on Ryosuke's side of the field to go for something like the extreme speed to deal damage, because that would be the only thing that could outspeed it. But unfortunately, again, those double edges just really added up, and without a way to, you know, consistently recover his Pokemon like Ryosuke has with the Tapu Fini, you know, with that Pinch Berry, he just sort of ran out of time. He ran out of health, and that's sort of how the game goes. I really like how Ryosuke sort of pivoted his strategy to keep that Tapu Fini safe, because I think that was really key, just giving him those opportunities. Whereas going back to game one, Gianluca really just targeted down that Tapu Fini fairly aggressively after Trick Room got set up. So it's just, I don't think it's something that he can choose to ignore anymore, given how that was, I think, the key difference between game one and game two, you know, minus, you know, a bit of different positioning from both these trainers. Honestly, and the Z move as well from that Necrozma.
Honestly, I think the biggest change that Gianluca needs to look at is bringing either the Groudon or the Komodo to round out a little bigger damage profile, right?
Yeah.
So we saw as soon as his Xerneas got knocked out, that was a problem. Yes, he did win the previous game without using the Xerneas too much, but
it was still there.
Yeah, as soon as it went down, I felt his damage output was just so low, so unattainable to get through 4 of Ryosuke's Pokemon. So we'll see exactly what change he makes. You know, playing 2 games, coming out with them 1-1, maybe now is the time to make one of those adaptations. I know you're a big fan of the Komodo. Certainly provides a number of different options. May not be the choice right now.
No.
But Min Groudon, unopposed by a Kyogre, could come in and just deal a ton of damage.
As much as I love Komo-O, and I really do love it, it's not the game for this Komo-O. You know, it's really just, you have those 2 Fairy-type Alolan Guardians on the opposing side of the field that Ryosuke could choose to bring in. You know, the Tapu Fini was just so central to its strategy. The Duskmane Necrozma has the Psychic Steel typing, which Komo-O does not appreciate at all. The Rayquaza also carries with it Dragon Ascent, which is a Flying-type move, which Komo-O does not appreciate at all. It's just not the right setup for this Pokemon. Groudon, on the other hand, you know, Fire Ground-type Pokemon, that would be great against a Pokemon like that Duskmane Necrozma. Certainly can weaken any potential Water-type moves that Tapu Fini might have, though given the set, I don't think that's as relevant. Known to be certainly an interesting Pokemon in terms of how you can run it, you know, speed or move-wise. Maybe could take advantage of something like the Tailwind, if that's sort of how Gianluca came to this tournament prepared for, and could deal a lot of big damage. Remember, one of the key adjustments we saw at the North American International Championships was the fact that these Groudons are beginning to become a little bit more special oriented, so they don't have to worry about stuff like Intimidate, you know, limiting their damage output. And as much as having the 2 Intimidates on Gianluca's team helped him out, I think if he's looking to make an adjustment to deal more consistent damage, you know, definitely keep the Amoonguss. You need that for Trick Room. Keep the Incineroar, because I think it's just one of the most versatile Pokemon and has access to that Z move that'll help you with the Necrozma, and just otherwise is a very consistent Pokemon. But maybe bring that Xerneas and Groudon along instead and just change things up just enough to again, allow you to deal more consistent damage like you did back in game 1.
I think what I'm interested in right now, you know, we've been looking at these players for a moment or two at the moment, and, you know, they're looking pretty calm and collected, but it's certainly a lot calmer a look from Ryosuke Kondo. He looks pretty chill. He knew what went wrong in game 1, he fixed it in game 2, and he gets that win. I think Gianluca a little more rattled by what he's seen going on there. Obviously still enjoying himself up on the stage this morning. But at the same time, you know, game 2 really didn't go in his favor, and needs to bounce back from that a little bit quicker. I think when you play one of these best of 3s and you make that adaptation, you've got the momentum if you win game 2, and it's always bad to feel like you've been bounced back on from a game 1 win. Yeah. But you've got to calm down, you've got to keep it cool, you've just got to push on and see exactly where you can go from there. So both players, though, relatively chilled out. Ryosuke adding the glasses, a little bit of focus in this one.
Yeah,
making sure he can see all the outs for a potential win.
I don't know how they stay so calm, honestly. I feel like if I were up on stage actually competing, you know, my hands would be sweating, I'd be shaking. I'd probably have like a little Pikachu stuffed animal with me. I'd be using for a bit of, emotional support kind of thing. It's such a big stage to be playing on, and it's so early on in the day as well. That pressure of getting to day 2 is still looming over these trainers' heads, and it's just not something that you can forget about, especially when you only have, 1 or 2 losses, sort of as a barrier between the two.
Well, they did spend a little bit of time composing themselves, and that turned into a very immediate lock-in from Ryosuke Kondo. Under 10 seconds to select his team. You do have a full 90 to go through, but a pretty much immediate choice of exactly how he's going to play this game. I'd be interested to see if there's any adaptations. I don't know if Kangaskhan or Tapu Koko really provide anything in this matchup, so they could probably stay on the bench once again, and the exact same 4 could come down. Of course, Gianluca taking a little more time on this one. Wants to make sure he's got options, and if he does decide to switch it up, make sure that he's supporting that team properly. You give up one of those support Pokemon in something like Amoonguss or Incineroar, and then you have to make the call. Which one do you leave behind? Do you leave behind Incineroar and then struggle maybe to get those Intimidates down because you're only relying on one Salamence pre-Mega Evolution? Or do you give up the Amoonguss and then say, okay, well, Trick Room goes up and I can't play as freely as I would like to? So if he does make the change, I'd be curious to see what gets dropped. In the same vein, if he can just protect that Xerneas a little better, we could be in for a much different game. It's round 2 of the World Championships, and every match really does matter.
It does, and I think this is when we're going to see sort of these trainers take it to that next level. So I can't wait to see how this match is going to play out. Another thing that Gianluca could do as a potential out for this turn is simply just try and knock out that Necrozma again. Turn 1, go for that big Z move, go for the big damage, and know that with a Pokemon like Groudon on your side, you're going to be dealing some big threatening damage, and your Xerneas, if you decided to bring it in the back, is going to be feeling, I think, a lot safer about the game moving forwards from this point in time.
Well, Necrozma and Incineroar, the same lead for Ryosuke Kondo, sticking there, but Gianluca Grassi does decide it's time to mix it up. I do want my Groudon to come to play. Of course, we are going to have that lovely rotation of all the abilities to start this one out. Intimidate's being shared, all the good stuff, and then the Primal Reversion from Groudon.
Saving the best for last, really.
Right, I think it's interesting to see exactly what order these things go in as well. It does give you more information for something like the Trick Room. The sunlight turns extremely harsh, so the Tapu Fini may struggle a little bit here. And obviously this Necrozma is not feeling the same way as it did in the previous round. It's definitely not enjoying facing down this new opposition, and I love this adaptation from Gianluca.
It's a really awesome adaptation, and I can't wait to see what kind of Groudon he decided to bring to the field. It has been intimidated, and Ryosuke does have access to something like the Rayquaza or the Tapu Fini most likely in the back of his party, which would certainly be relatively safer switches for that Necrozma. Not safe, but it would keep the Necrozma safe enough for him to get more information and, maybe start to threaten this Groudon with some big damage of his own. I know a lot of Rayquaza like to bring moves that can sort of counter Groudon, especially when you're looking at a matchup here where you don't really have the Kyogre to sort of threaten with that massive, torrential even water type damage that usually players rely on to get that KO.
Well, we are going to see the Rayquaza come in immediately. That Necrozma certainly spooked, to say the least. Fake out lands from Gianluca's side on the opposing Incineroar immediately, and an Eruption starting it off for Groudon. Obviously not the best targets for those, even at full health. But giving up a piece of information on exactly what kind of moveset it's using, this gives Ryosuke a whole lot of information on how exactly to deal with it. If you're relying on Eruption to deal your damage, just get some damage down on it. Neutralize that attack. It does rely on the exact health of your Pokemon. It's pretty much the fire version of Water Spout. Both of those do more damage the more health you have, and that's why he switched it out. He wants to preserve it. He wants it at full health when it faces down that Duskmane Necrozma. Amoonguss comes in its place, so Groudon keeping itself safe at full health, and then the Mega Rayquaza taking the field. It's been an interesting battle to see exactly how this Amoonguss lines up against it, and it could be in a lot of trouble if it gets caught immediately. Dragon Ascent starts this turn off from Rayquaza. Looks like it's going to be a safe turn right now for the Amoonguss as Incineroar takes the damage, clings on with a small amount of health. The defenses are dropped. Incineroar on Gianluca's side does U-turn, but we are finally going to get to see a move from Ryosuke's Incineroar. It got faked out last turn, and it's been moving last. We'll see exactly what it decides to go for here. But that Incineroar on Gianluca's side, so low in health, is still going to be providing so much value purely by coming on the field, dropping an Intimidate, getting a Fake Out down, and leaving the field as well. Groudon takes the place of Gianluca's Incineroar. Desolate Land coming back into play, so those the Delta Stream of Rayquaza immediately removed. Incineroar on Ryosuke's side will U-turn itself, do a little bit of damage down on Groudon. Every little helps in weakening those eruptions. They really do add up very slowly, and I think we're going to have to see Ryosuke's last Pokemon here, because he cannot consider bringing this Duskmane and Necrozma in right now. He does show it off to be Tapu Fini, so certainly curious to see exactly how that will fare, especially with the Desolate Land ability in play. But there's certainly options right now.
Yeah, I think that was a really great turn from both these trainers, but Ryosuke found a way to just not take really any damage from the Pokemon on Gianluca's side of the field, and just got a much better position on the field because of it. The Tapu Fini's out, Misty Terrain is in play, so if Ryosuke is worried about those moves like Spore, he does have the opportunity to go ahead and switch out that Mega Rayquaza so that he can come back in at a point in time, maybe once that Amoonguss has been removed. And another interesting thing is, if he were to switch out that Mega Rayquaza for something like the Incineroar, and that Incineroar had, Flare Blitz, probably the Fire-type move that most Incineroar like to bring, this would be a great time to take advantage of that sunlight, deal some big damage to that Amoonguss, or force whatever switches in for that Amoonguss to take that big damage, and sort of, punish the positioning, punish this adjustment of bringing the Groudon over, whatever Pokemon he decided to substitute it out yet, because we're not quite sure what that is.
Amoonguss does decide that it's just time to protect itself. The safest way to keep yourself from taking damage. Eruption dealing alright damage, nothing too special, nothing too awful. As Tapu Fini's Nature's Madness does not fall for a potential Rage Powder play right here. Does land on that Groudon. That's so much damage taken away from that Eruption. So I think even the Duskmane Necrozma is feeling a lot better for it now. And I think Ryosuke's strategy right now is to just deal with Groudon. Do not let it play the game, and then force Gianluca into a similar position as last time, where he had just defensive, just supportive Pokemon on his team. It's really a case of clear the way for Duskmane Necrozma against anything else over on Gianluca's side.
And that's why I love the Nature's Madness on this Tapu Fini. Having a guaranteed, half of your health is gone provided the attack connects, really punishes Pokemon like Groudon and Kyogre when they rely on those water spouts or those eruptions to deal big damage in games. Tapu Fini is not going to take a lot of damage from a Fire-type move. It's not going to take a lot of damage from a Water-type move, even with their respective weathers up on the field. So just a really bulky, solid Pokemon to sort of deal with these Titans.
Well, Rayquaza coming in for Ryosuke does mean the Earth Power will not land. It's forced into its other move because of that addition. And that's been called so fantastically. He's really doubled down on that slot. He said, if you leave Incineroar in, I'll get the knockout. But if you don't, I'm going to back it up with the Spore. So, really interesting to see exactly how he plays it out. The Misty Terrain doesn't affect the flying Rayquaza. That means Amoonguss finally gets caught by that Groudon, by the Nature's Madness of Tapu Fini. The interesting thing here as well, we've talked about the weather a couple times. Delta Stream is now the dominant weather on the field. It's pretty windy in there. And that basically means that if there is a Water-type attack from this Tapu Fini, he may be able to pull it out on this Groudon very, very quickly.
Yeah, and Gianluca, I feel, is almost forced to sort of figure out a way to, keep that that offensive pressure moving forward, since, the Groudon, it has been weakened. Those Earth Powers aren't going to be dealing a lot of damage to Tapu Fini, cannot do damage to that Mega Rayquaza. Amoonguss, not known to be a offensive Pokemon, might be better to just protect this turn, switch in something like this Incineroar to get an Intimidate down, maybe to fake out something, assuming your Amoonguss could get knocked out this turn. He really has to, I think, sacrifice one of his Pokemon here, unfortunately, and to take some big damage in on the switch to try and find a way out. And, fortunately, it looks like the adjustment was to bring the Groudon over the Mega Salamence. So knowing that he still has that Xerneas in play, knowing that he has the opportunity here for a fake-out Geomancy combination, is certainly going to be great for him moving forwards. But Ryosuke calling that switch really well.
Yeah, that... I mean, the Incineroar getting caught by a Hydro Pump, it was probably preferred to be on the Groudon, but at least you get a knockout.
At
and
least
as
you
well,
got the knockout, no fake out.
Yeah, you get rid of the fake out, so this setting up this Geomancy becomes a little bit harder. Of course, right now, your Rayquaza is still asleep. your Groudon's in a tough position, but you still can't disrespect it, you still can't ignore it, and you can't even Hydro Pump it now because that Death Land has come back into play. I do like bringing both the restricted Pokemon. I think that's a whole lot more important for Gianluca, but at the same time, you know, there comes a point where Groudon's low enough on its health that it may just be able to get knocked out by this Duskmane Necrozma, and that Duskmane Necrozma is going to cause and pose so many problems for Gianluca if he doesn't have a clear, concise answer. He's already lost one in Incineroar, and he doesn't want to lose another in Groudon.
Yeah, and saving that Amoonguss for later on in the game, potentially after Misty Terrain has expired, I think is just an out that he's saving for himself. It would be great if Gianluca could find a way to knock out one of these Pokemon this turn so that he could maybe force that Mega Rayquaza or that Necrozma back onto the field a little bit earlier than Ryosuke would like. And Xerneas going for big damage here with Moonblast is certainly the perfect way to start that.
Yeah, well, that's going to get rid of, not get rid of the Incineroar. Not enough. Gianluca knew what was coming. He did have to double in, but the Incineroar is removed from play. May honestly be a really good thing for Ryosuke, because he can just immediately bring back in this Rayquaza on top of that to really rub a little salt in the wound. If you're relying on two special attackers to get through the back end of the game for you, and your opponent's just set up a light screen, you are in so much trouble.
And Gianluca doesn't have the benefit of already going for that Geomancy to sort of, you know, mitigate some of this light screen. You know, this Groudon has taken so much damage, so those eruptions are going to be weakened. The Earth Power is going to be weakened by the light screen. Really, any attacks at this point that Gianluca has available to him to deal damage, you know, won't be at their full potential. And that little bit of wiggle room is, I think, what Ryosuke was looking for at this end game. You know, he kept light screen a secret on his Tapu Fini throughout games 1, 2, and 3, even though I think it would have been a really interesting move to reveal a bit sooner, maybe when staring down that Amoonguss and those Rage Powders, and instead of going for something like a Heal Pulse. But this is the setup he was looking for. Yes, there still is the threat of the Amoonguss in the back of the party, and it certainly could spore a few things if given the opportunity, but you know, overall, he has the opening. He can go for the Z move onto that Xerneas. He can go for, you know, big damage onto these Pokemon and, you know, hopefully clean things up going into round 3.
Yeah, well, the Geomancy does come through from the Xerneas, knows it's going to need to power on through all the way through this light screen. The power-up going off immediately, no surprises there. Of course, you know, I think it's going to be really key for him to try and deal with this Duskmane Necrozma as soon as possible. He's going to be relying a whole lot on Groudon, and that switch in, taking away the sunlight is certainly going to help. Groudon decides to roar, so making sure no Trick Rooms come into play. Obviously, calling Ryosuke, trying to set that up for a little later on. Tapu Fini brought into play earlier than it would like. So Ryosuke's way out of that was to Trick Room instead of going after the Xerneas with something like the attacks from the Necrozma. And that's been called, this Groudon in a great position to set that roar up. And now we're in an interesting one. Obviously, Rayquaza's still controlling the weather. Tapu Fini now has the opportunity to try and Hydro Pump this Groudon, but you can't ignore the Xerneas even with a light screen up.
And that was such a good play by Gianluca. You know, I was honestly thinking that Ryosuke would just go for the big Z move into that Xerneas. You know, just hope that the Xerneas didn't go for something like a Protect, get that knockout, and just sort of push your way into the end game. Trick Room would have been very helpful for him because that means all of his Pokemon would, you know, move before Gianluca, certainly before the Xerneas. But just really, really well played Groudon. Really great keeping that roar a secret. A lot of Groudon have been using that as a tech to primarily stop Xerneas, but because it's actually one priority tier above Trick Room, it'll stop Trick Room as well. So. And just, again, these trainers repositioning, trying to get the Necrozma staring down the Xerneas, and it's just going to be a really interesting endgame state now that this Rayquaza has been knocked out without dealing really any damage this game.
I think, honestly, this endgame state just becomes a win for Gianluca. Look at the way his board is set up. There's no wins in play anymore. He has no way to deal with this Amoonguss. So right now, he can just keep Rage Powdering and pulling attacks that way. The Tapu Fini can't really hurt it. The Duskmane Necrozma can't really hurt it. So even if he buys himself one turn, then he's going to be in a great position to just clean up this game with Dazzling Gleams over and over again. Even if he doesn't successfully do that, you know, he's going to be in a good position to bring Groudon back in now that something like that Rayquaza is gone. And he's going to have complete control of the weather. The other factor we need to look at, it doesn't come up often, but it's come up today. Look at that timer. We are down to 1 minute remaining.
it's getting pretty low, and it should be interesting as well, given the fact that we are in a Game 3 situation. So those tiebreakers are going to be really important. You know, number of Pokemon remaining on the field. If Ryosuke can get a knockout here on the Groudon on that turn, that's going to bring us into stage 2 of the tiebreakers, which relates to how much HP is remaining on these Pokemon. So, you know, this could be a really key turn, even though it doesn't seem like it. It might not be the term that wins Ryosuke the game in terms of the actual battle we're watching play out, but if he's able to keep his Pokemon on the field and keep them at relatively high health, you know, he might win due to the tiebreaker mechanics that we have in place.
We'll see exactly when that timer lines up. There is going to be a little discrepancy there, so we will update you as soon as we can. But this turn rages on. You know, we are going to see a big attack coming through from this Necrozma. The Xerneas isn't quite removed from play. Nature's Madness is going to keep on going. Unfortunately, you're never going to get a knockout with Nature's Madness. That's just not how it works as this one goes on. But the Pokemon count is, of course, in Gianluca's favor right now, and he needs to keep that, I think, or just try and close out this game. He's got his 2 restricted Pokemon down as well. As soon as we get into the +3 turns, that's going to be the first metric to try and hit, and we'll see exactly how it goes. Our timer has run out, though, and we'll see exactly how this one shapes up. Tapu Fini able to take another Moonblast, loses its special attack. Groudon immediately Earth Powering in retaliation. It's a 3-1 Pokemon lead now, and you're really asking a whole lot of this Duskmane Necrozma to try and sweep through the rest of the game. Sunsteel Strike coming down. It's going to jump up in the sky and try and deal as much damage as it needs to, but the count is still very much in Gianluca's favor. This time, though, he goes after the Groudon. A critical hit does deal with it, but the key thing here is he doesn't really have a way to deal with something like this Amoonguss. Light Screen does end, so even though it's not going to be super effective, that Xerneas is still going to be able to deal good amounts of damage as Amoonguss takes the field, potentially the last time in this battle. It's at full health, which is certainly interesting to note. The use of Regenerator saving it there, and we'll see if Gianluca can wrap it up in this turn.
If this Necrozma has a way to deal big damage to this Amoonguss, you know, and tie up the Pokemon count, it certainly will have the health advantage. I think it's going to take 2 Moonblasts to bring it down into the red, just given, you know, how bulky of a Pokemon is and how great typing it has. You know, the Trick Room here is certainly an interesting option, but both the Xerneas and the Amoonguss have access to Protect, and, you know, when you're in the +3 turn situation, when you have the Pokemon advantage, you want to be using those Protects, you know, to just keep your Pokemon on the field. I mean, you can't get hurt through that, and even though this Amoonguss will be taking damage this turn, again, it's very unlikely, even though this Necrozma is going for its Z move, that it's going to be able to get that knockout.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to get that damage down sometime. He's been holding on to it for so long.
This is like your last opportunity, because even if you do knock out that Amoonguss, that Xerneas is going to be able to connect a Moonblast.
Right, I mean, we are a little bit different to the time you guys see on screen. But Gianluca looking pretty relaxed there. Doesn't seem too fussed by it at all. Obviously, Trick Room is up in play. This Amoonguss notoriously bulky and at full health as well. So we'll see exactly how this turn is going to shape out for him. He looks pretty comfortable in it. As Amoonguss drops and reveals its item. The Focus Sash has been hidden all game. And that means Gianluca will have one more turn of potential, you know, moving that around. You know, we'll see exactly how it goes. But I really don't see a way for Ryosuke Kondo to tidy up both of them. Like I say, we are in the end game right now. Our timer's a little bit off, so we're still playing under kind of normal regulation time. Necrozma's Sunsteel Strike will have to target that Amoonguss. It's still around because of that Focus Sash reveal. And that means that Xerneas is going to be able to wrap up the game for Gianluca Grassi of Italy.
What a crazy, well-played Amoonguss. If you think about it, there never really was a situation where that item could have been activated on the Amoonguss throughout that entire game. So just keeping that Focus Sash and, you know, using that Regenerator ability as well to sort of keep it a viable option even as we go later on into the Game 3. Just really incredibly well piloted, and just a really interesting Pokemon or item for a Pokemon like Amoonguss to have. You know, Focus Sash, I feel like traditionally is associated with those Pokemon that